welcome you all to California Times. My name is Guy Meyer, and I'm very pleased to have as a special guest Dawn Weisz, who is the CEO of MCE, otherwise known as Marin Clean Energy. And this is a very important organization, and you have a very interesting and important role in this world of our Marin County environment. And I've been very curious about the organization, really from when I saw it being launched to where it is now. So I'm really happy to have you here.
It's an honor to be here.
There's so many questions. It seems like such a complicated world that you are involved with. But I've made a list of questions, and I'm going to try to stay in my usual highly organized state. So let me start by asking you, Dawn, if you would set for everybody right now, if you could, a little bit of the context in our world, why here we are, Marin Clean Energy, 2019.
Yeah. Well, I think to tell that story, I would want to start by going back, actually, about 20 years. Just before the year 2000, there was a lot of interest in Marin County around finding ways to reduce our carbon emissions. And there was less awareness of climate change at that time. But there was a small subset of folks in the community and elected officials at the County of Marin and other local governments that were really interested in finding some solutions to reduce the amount of carbon emissions that are being generated in our county. And part of the thinking was that we wanted to find a way that we could create a model program that could maybe even be replicated in other places. And we wanted to have some type of measurable impact on the amount of emissions that were being generated here. So we did an analysis, and at that time I was with the County of Marin as a staffer working on sustainability planning issues. And we did an analysis to determine where are our emissions coming from. A lot of them come from transportation, that's still true today, but the next big chunk of emissions were coming from stationary building sources, so our homes and our businesses. And at that time, we were only able to choose one power supply source to serve as our electricity sources for all of our buildings through PG&E. And we were really interested in finding some other choices, knowing that could have a big impact on our carbon footprint. At that time, the fossil fuel content of our electricity supply was a lot higher than it is now. We only had about 10% renewable energy in the mix. So we got involved in an effort to get a bill approved in the legislature, AB 117, a Migden bill that would allow local governments to become the power purchasers for our communities. And we thought that could be a great way to redirect where folks are getting their electricity from, and by doing that, have a really big impact on the carbon emissions.
Now, this was a bill that went through the California State Assembly and Senate. It wasn't part of the proposition system.
Correct.
And what year was that?
That was in 2002 that it passed.
And when it passed, was there a model already? Somebody must have conceived of a model that they wanted to achieve, that they had a picture of.
So it was modeled after legislation that had already been passed in a couple of other states, including Massachusetts and Ohio. They had launched programs in the late 90s that were also allowing local governments to become the power purchasers in their communities. So we were following in the footsteps of those two states.
Massachusetts and Ohio, you say?
Correct.
And do those states, as far as you know, still have those programs in effect? And are
they
working like yours?
They do. They are each structured a little differently than MCE, and I can get into the details of that. But the concept is the same, where the local government can make the choice about what type of generation is going to be serving their local load.
it's a complicated world with this idea of making this purchase of electricity to be delivered to, let's say, the person who joins or that address. So let's go ahead and take a look at that in terms of how does that happen, and first off, in terms of the juice. Let's say you have a small company that you want to support, maybe in New Mexico with a little hydroelectric company that somebody has started and is putting energy in. Tell me, how would that, is that an example that you would work with? Or?
No, we tend to buy most of our power locally, or at least within the state. We do buy some power from outside of the state, but that's not really the best example of the type of power that we buy. So a lot of our supply comes from solar, wind. We also have some geothermal power and some biogas that comes from landfills that are releasing methane and using that methane to generate electricity. A lot of our biogas facilities, for example, are in Northern California. In fact, we even have one operating in Nevada that is creating energy for our customers. And then a little further to the west, we've got one in Solano County. That was one of the first power supply sources that we contracted with in 2010 before we began serving customers. So we buy energy in very much the same way that a company like PG&E buys energy. We will issue a request for bids. We will look at the bids, assess the pros and cons of each one. We look at the price, of course. The location is a factor. We look at whether the vendor has a history of paying fair wages and supporting labor unions. Those are factors that we take into account when we're evaluating proposals. And then we get a short list in place, and we work with our board and the technical committee of our board in particular to help finalize agreements with those suppliers and execute them. And we like to enter into contracts for long-term in many cases. We also do have some short and medium-term contracts, but the long-term contracts allow us to create a lot of certainty for our customers as far as what prices we'll be paying. Our contracts typically don't have an escalator in the price, so we know what we'll be paying 20 years out, for example.
Is that an actual example? Would you have contracts that are based on as long as 20 years?
We do.
Really?
We do, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Would that be a small supplier? It seems like such a long time for anybody to, to commit to a certain price in this world.
Yeah, well, a lot of these facilities are able to get built because they get a contract with us. And so it's a way for them to get financing. And it might take them, they might have 20 years at least of useful life on the contract. So it's helpful to them to know they're going to have a buyer for that full term. And it's helpful to us to know that we've locked in a price for that full term. And it's great for the state because that's the way we're getting new steel in the ground projects actually built.
Let's go back to your initial year. 2002, you say the bill was passed. MCE became an active and working organization in what year?
2008.
2008. So
Yeah.
6 years later, it all began in that first year.
Yeah.
Were you, how did you get up to speed? What was that like? You must have had consultants, and it was probably quite an interesting initial challenge for sure.
Yeah, well, we did a lot of analysis, and local governments tend to be good at careful vetting before going forward on something. And so we started off writing grants, getting some funding to do the analysis, and then we did hire technical support. We ended up working quite a bit with Navigant Consulting. They did a lot of the early analysis for us. and came back with results showing that we could increase the amount of renewable energy in our power supply by double while keeping rates about the same. And that was exactly what we were hoping for, and in a sense it felt too good to be true. So we did a peer review of that study with another consulting firm to make sure we weren't missing anything, and they came back saying, no, that all looks right, it all adds up, and it looks like you really could achieve those results, based on what the market looks like today. Of course, that can always change. But with the promising results we continued to get, we did some additional analysis. We had bond counsel review. We had a lot of analysis over many years, and we eventually formed a working group with a representative from each of the cities and towns in Marin. Also, the water districts joined in and supported us, and even contributed some funding to some of the analysis that we were doing, because they also have a vested interest in getting clean energy supply and affordable energy supply. So it was really a group effort with all the municipalities in the county that resulted in us actually deciding to form MCE in 2008.
And when you started out in 2008, you were serving Marin County exclusively. And what was the size of your initial clientele in that year? What was the population base, or what would that have been? Would you have a rough estimate or an exact estimate?
I have an exact estimate.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd start by saying that of the 12 jurisdictions in Marin County, only 8 chose to join initially. There were a few that wanted to wait and see how things worked out. They ended up joining the next year. But initially, we were just serving in 8 of the jurisdictions. And our first phase was only 8,000 customers. So we intentionally started with a small subset of the customer base so that we could get everything operational and then do some bigger expansions. And it was about 2 years later that we did the mass enrollment of the remaining Marin customers. That was in 2012, where we added 82,000 accounts.
Did that basically just take over all the regular PG&E customers, and they were brought into the fold, and then they had the option to opt out? Was that it? They didn't really have a choice. It just took place.
They really do have a choice.
Yeah, but I'm just curious when you say it was a mass enrollment.
Yeah,
so
the way
most people don't like to fill out things and do that. Things tend to either happen to them or not. But
so the way it works is about 3 months before the enrollment, we begin sending notices in the mail. We also do a lot of advertising in local media, the newspapers. We go to a lot of local events, fairs, farmers markets, festivals, homeowners associations, to make sure folks are paying attention and aware of the transition. And in all of these venues, we're letting folks know how they can opt out if they don't want to stay with MCE's service. We're also letting them know how they can opt up to get 100% green, because that's another choice that we offer, is the 100% green. So during this 3-month period before enrollment, there's a lot of engagement to let folks know how to opt out, either by phone or on the website, or even in person. In some cases, we're able to do that. And then when folks are transitioned over, if they haven't opted out, they'll be transitioned over, and then they have another 2 months where we're sending additional mailers, letting them know how to opt out if they didn't want to stay with us.
It's not too complicated for somebody if for whatever reasons they wanted to opt out.
It's about a 2-minute phone call, or clicking through on the website. But if folks miss it, which is easy to do, I know we all get a lot of mail, they can opt out anytime after that. So we don't want any accidental customers. We don't want unintended customers. But we have seen a lot of folks stay with the program, and our participation rate is about 86%.
Now, when you began, as an entity, as an organization, what type of, you're officially a CEO, which almost makes you think of an executive of a business, and I suspect is in essence a business.
Well,
but what is that definition? What is MCE in terms of public-private business? How is it defined?
we are a local government agency, and we are defined as a joint powers authority. So there are many JPAs, or joint powers authorities, in Marin County, and it's typically where you have representatives from multiple municipalities getting together to work on something. There's a streetlight JPA, for example, that has multiple jurisdictions working together on streetlight issues. We are a JPA that is governed by an elected board. So our governing board has one representative from each city, town, and county that we serve. In some cases, we've had a city that wants to share their vote with another municipality, but for the most part, we have about one representative for every city and town that we serve.
And this is the board, the governing board?
The governing board that I answer to.
I see.
And then we have a staff of we have staff spread out into 2 offices, San Rafael, and we now have an office also in Concord in the East Bay.
And how often does the board meet?
Yeah, the board meets, we have a hold on calendars for once a month, but we try to minimize our need for meetings to typically it's between 4 and 6 meetings per year. In addition, we have standing committees that board members can participate in, and those tend to happen more frequently. They tend to happen every month. We will skip a month if we're able to here and there, but those standing committees tend to happen on a regular basis. And the 2 are the executive committee and then the technical committee.
Now, is the board, is it simply council members and or the mayors of the local towns, or can be other people from the community as well?
No, they have to designate one of their elected officials to sit on our board, but it's up to the city or the county to determine who they want to send to sit on our board. But it needs to be either a representative from the Board of Supervisors, if it's a county, or if it's a city or town, it would be someone from their council. Could be their mayor.
Do you, is this sort of your governing body? Are these the people who, tell you which,
this
or,
is the governing body that makes decisions for the agency, particularly around rate setting, determining what energy supply we're going to purchase, and determining our budget for the year. The board is also responsible for helping to identify programs that we want to roll out in the community. We have a lot of energy efficiency programs, an electric vehicle program, and we're just now launching some resiliency programs that are going to be responsive to the PSPS power shutdown events.
And the big mass enrollment happened 2 years later.
Not quite. So we formed the agency in 2008, and we spent 2009 doing our power procurement. 2010 is when we began serving customers.
Oh, I see.
And then 2012 was the mass enrollment.
I see.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, it was just Marin County energy.
That's right.
Was that, when did it change from no longer being just for the residents of Marin County?
Yeah, great question. Well, our founding board chair, Charles McGlashan, went to a local government commission event and got talking with the mayor of Richmond, Mayor Tom Butt, about our community choice program. And Tom Butt got very interested in the program and asked if we might consider expanding across the bridge. So we spent really a couple of years exploring that and ultimately decided it would be a great way to deepen our impact on climate change and expand the greenhouse gas reductions even further beyond the boundaries of Marin. And so we, in 2013, we did add the city of Richmond to MCE. Mayor Tom Butt joined our board and is now our vice chair. And since that time, we've had many other communities ask to join. Many of them are in Contra Costa County. Also, the city of Benicia has joined. All of Napa, all the cities and towns and the county. And then unincorporated Solano and unincorporated Contra Costa have joined as well. So we currently have a 4-county footprint for MCE.
Now, has this doubled or tripled your amount of people that you now serve with Marin Clean Energy?
Yeah, a little more than quadrupling.
Quadrupling.
Yeah, so we currently serve about 470,000 accounts, which is a population of about 1.2 million.
Wow. And stepping back to the passage of the bill that got you started, were you the only community organization in California that got going? Are there others in California that you're...
Yeah, there are quite a few others.
Yeah.
And when we were supporting that legislation, we were not alone. There were other local governments supporting that legislation too. Some of them partnered with us on the studies that we did after the passage of the bill to look at feasibility in their communities. And in the South San Joaquin Irrigation District in the Central Valley was actually ahead of us in getting ready to launch a CCA program. And they were very generous in sharing a lot of their lessons learned along the way. Unfortunately, they were not able to launch, but there may be a new effort reviving there soon. In the meantime, after our launch, many other community choice programs began to launch, and there are now 19 across the state, as far north as Humboldt, as far south as LA County and Ventura. San Diego is going to be launching their program in 2020.
Wow.
And going to the east, we have a CCA all the way out in Placer County. And many of the large communities in the state, San Francisco, San Jose, have also launched programs. So it's become a very big movement, and we now have more customers in PG&E's territory getting their generation from a CCA than from PG&E.
Are there any that compare in size right now to Marin Clean Energy, or it sounds like you are?
Yes.
Just, yeah?
Yes, I mean, we are one of the large ones, but we are not the largest. LA County and Ventura County combined are serving quite a few cities in that area, and they are currently the largest load in the state among CCAs.
Now, when you made that move, did you, bringing Richmond in, did you have a sense of, well, what is the open door policy then? Is it just keep welcoming communities into Marin Clean Energy, and is it
no? There's a little more to it than that. We've gotten inquiries from communities all around the state, actually, and before the community choice movement had grown very large, there were communities up and down the state that had expressed some interest in joining. And we found that a lot of the value that we're able to bring to a community is by staying very connected to the community and through that local engagement with our elected leaders. And we felt that we'd be able to be a lot more effective if we could stay within a local geographic region. So all of the communities all the counties that we're serving right now are contiguous to our service area. So we're not hopping on a plane and going to Santa Barbara or San Diego.
Do you have a sense of where the limits might be, or is it?
Yeah, I think at this point it's very clear. The 4 counties that we're serving are on each side of those counties is another community choice program that has launched. So there's a natural kind of geographic unfolding of who's doing what territory. But I do want to say, going back to the Richmond example, is that we were, my background is in environmental justice, and before I came to Marin, I was working in Los Angeles on environmental justice issues where polluting industries were trying to go into communities of color and low-income communities, promising them jobs that never materialized. And I was so excited that we have had the opportunity to have this program happen in a community where we could bring jobs, clean jobs, to a community where there was a real need for that. And Richmond has been an amazing partner with us in helping us tap into the local workforce to do job training. We've worked with Richmond Build, which is an amazing local organization. They're affiliated with the city. And we were able to build the largest public-private solar facility in the Bay Area, right in Richmond, on 65 acres of brownfield land at a Chevron facility. And we were able to create a lot of career pathways for folks in the Richmond community by spending 2 years doing job training before breaking ground on the project. And that way we had folks that were qualified, trained, and ready to build it.
It's such a fascinating and complicated little world here. It's hardly know where to begin with the next questions, because I want to understand. I think people would like to know, have an idea about maybe 65 acres, how many homes that provides energy for. Well, why don't you get into that then? I did a little bit of research looking at what we've got here, and I found something. See if this sounds agreeable to your knowledge. 1,000 homes need 7.5 acres. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Now, what would that be for, just to get an idea of my megawatts from, God, I'm really confused. I mean, not confused, I just don't know.
Yeah.
An average home, 2 kids in
An average home uses
couple.
about 400 kilowatt hours per month on average.
400
4 to 5.
kilowatt hours per month. I'm
Yeah.
so naive about this. Per month. And, okay.
But I think that it's, what's probably more important than getting into the exact measurements is thinking about the time of day when that energy is being produced and when it's being used. Because one of the things that we're finding now, we have a lot of solar in our portfolio, and there's a lot of solar that's come online across the state. And so that solar is sometimes, there's so much of it in the middle of the day, sometimes it's more than we need. Sometimes the state is needing to curtail that energy because there's not as much load in the middle of the day as there is supply. So one of the things we're trying to do now is help shift that to the evening hours when there is a huge demand for power, and there's a much greater likelihood in the evening that a natural gas facility, a fossil facility, is going to be called upon to supply power to customers at that time because the sun has gone down. So we're interested in exploring battery storage technologies that would store up that energy in the middle of the day, adding to the load that we need in the middle of the day, and then release that energy in the evening when the sun has gone down. That would really help with the overall carbon footprint for the state.
Now, you don't, at this point, have any facilities or does the 65 acre in Richmond have its own little, does it hold energy too? Or is that energy just immediately joining the grid and being measured as it does?
Yeah, it immediately joins the grid. So we don't have any storage at the Richmond facility. We have helped to install storage with some of our customers on site, but we have not done any storage that is utility scale, but we are in the process of exploring that right now, and we expect to have a project or two launched in 2020.
All right, let's get into the element of procuring this electricity, let's say from a solar source, wherever that might be. You say mostly in California now. What is the, who is the, when you get these contracts, on your website you listed some providers, you have 40 different providers or more. How many of them are, let's say, independent? Very few. I mean, small, actual. I mean, it's not like a ma and pa energy producer. Too many in California or the world, right?
Some of them are.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the scale, right? So there's some small biogas facilities that we're buying from that I would designate as kind of a mom and pop counterparty. We also have quite a bit of local projects that have been built locally through our feed-in tariff, and those are oftentimes built by a local landowner that's looking for a revenue stream on their property and a good use of their land. We have a couple of those. The first feed-in tariff project that we built was right at the San Rafael Airport on 48 rooftop hangars. So a great use of space that was being unused. And this is a family-owned business, and they've gone on to build another feed-in tariff project for us on another piece of land that they own. And this can be a great way for the landowner to help support a cleaner environment and better energy sources for all of us at MCE.
When you procure this energy from, let's say, a biomass company or organization, a big contract or a small contract, from what I understand, there's some kind of a certificate issued. Is that how it's sort of given as some form of measure that something becomes green or non-green or can be identified as such?
Yeah, in order to comply with the state renewable portfolio standard, we track every kilowatt hour of electricity that we buy through a system called wregis, and there is a
spelled R-E-G-I-S?
W-R-E-G-I-S.
W-R-E-G-I-S. Does that stand for something, or is that a word?
Yeah, it's the Western Renewable Energy Information System. And they track every renewable energy credit that is produced, bought, and retired. And so that's typically the pathway. So when you are buying renewable energy, you buy the renewable energy credit with the energy, and then you have to demonstrate that you purchased it, and then when we're done using it, we retire it so it wouldn't get resold again.
When you buy it, is there like a moment in time that it's given you kind of measure it as being released and now retired, or how does that work?
On a monthly basis, we track the transfers into our wregis account. So when we're paying the supplier for what they've generated for us, we need to verify that they've transferred all of those renewable energy credits into our account before we pay for the energy, because that is what proves that it was delivered. We also cross-check that with deliveries made to the California Independent System Operator, where the electricity is delivered onto the grid. And we look at both of those things before validating payment to the counterparty.
Now that's like kind of the crucial element of the whole structure of MCE, isn't it? In a way, this being able to measure a sense of what is renewable, and the certificates form a sort of a documentation. Is that?
And it's a legal requirement
for
the
state. A legal requirement?
Yeah.
Is it because of legal? Let's say, for instance, PG&E or Con Ed probably don't have those requirements, right?
They do.
They do too?
Yeah.
And so they measure as well what is renewable, what is non-renewable. They have to, each one that does that.
They have to report on that just like we do. Same exact standard.
Now, let's say if you purchase from some of your big suppliers, like you listed Calpine and Dominion and a few others I didn't recognize, are they, you're buying green energy from them, right? I mean, not something that's from their portfolio, or would you say? Is that a fair way of describing it?
We do buy green energy from Calpine and Dominion. Yeah, those are some examples.
And those would be, you documented with the certificates. Is that still a major portion of the overall annual portfolio for MCE?
The renewable content?
Well, let's say from the bigger guys, like you listed them, Calpine and Dominion and I think it was GP or whatever. There's a few that are your big partners. I imagine that it's kind of necessary for you to...
Well, we buy from a range of counterparties. Dominion is an owner of a solar facility that we ended up having built for us by another counterparty. I can't recall which one it was, but typically during pre-development and development of a solar facility, for example, you'll have a development company that bids in the project. We will enter into a long-term contract with them. They will get it built and online. Once it's reached commercial operations and we begin, receiving the generation and the supply from them, they might then get ready to go develop some other projects and sell the finished project to another company that is in the business of maintaining projects, because it's kind of a different business model. And that's pretty common in the industry. The investor-owned utilities like PG&E will do the same thing. So because you brought up Dominion, I thought it would be worth mentioning that they are playing that role for a couple of our projects where they're continuing to be the counterparty that delivers the energy to us after it's already been developed. So these are for contracts that are for all the output of a facility. It might be a 20 megawatt facility, for example, that we've entered into contract for 20 years, and we're going to get a certain amount of energy transferred to us every month.
And knowing that Dominion or maybe even Calpine also has has a non-renewable element to their business, do you feel like you can define that clearly and not be a part of whatever their reliance on fossil fuels or
Well, I think that our state and our country to some degree is in a transition right now, and it's really an exciting transition to be a part of. A lot of energy companies that have been in the business for years, they have been involved in fossil-based energy supply, and they're now shifting their business model to incorporate and embrace renewable supply, and it's wonderful to see that. The role that MCE can play in this transition is really incentivize and expedite that transition to happen on a faster time scale by being a buyer of these renewable resources that we want to see in our power supply mix. So if we were to, the more that we can buy these greener sources, the more we can help that transition be accelerated across the state. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Well, I guess knowing that electrons don't really have too much personality, and once they're in the wires, they do flow, and sort of knowing in the mix of the corporate milieu of our world and just kind of digging into trying to find out where the energy, it's always been the question for me with MCE and the green thing, and I think that there's an element that you're touching on that is a sense of, well, maybe we need to compromise, but we're incentivizing the right direction. And
yeah, I wouldn't call it a compromise. I would call it a transition and helping to lead a transition in the market with the choices that we want to make. And we're fortunate because the state is moving in the same direction, looking to phase out fossil generation. Although the leaders on the MCE board have really raised the bar and are looking to have us phase out the fossil in our portfolio way ahead of the state mandate, which is exciting. And we know that it can be done. You know, when we launched in 2010, the standard generation supply mix in our service area supplied by PG&E was about 12% renewable. And we launched with 25% renewable on day one at parity cost-wise. So customers were getting double the amount of renewable energy at the same price on the first day that we began serving them. By the next year, we were able to double the amount of renewable content in our portfolio to 50%. That's at the default level, so nobody's getting anything less than that. We also, of course, offered our 100% option, and still do, called Deep Green, for folks that want to get 100% renewable power right away. But we were able to raise the bar very quickly, and what we saw after that is the investor-owned utilities, particularly PG&E, started to really ratchet up the amount of renewables in their power content. And soon after that, they began to offer a 100% renewable option to customers.
PG&E has that now?
PG&E has that now, which is great because it's really what we envisioned from the beginning is being a change agent. And we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good and try and change the entire world overnight. We have to, I think Einstein said this, you have to invent the new world you want to see within the shell of the old. And so as we make this transition, I think what we're able to do is really accelerate it and raise the bar and show that it can be done. It can be done faster. And that has caused a huge movement to ripple behind some of the changes that we've made.
Does the Sierra Club, or I'm not sure if, sometimes I wonder if the environmental groups are as strong or as active as they once were. It feels like I may not hear from them much anymore. But are they, when you make these decisions, because I'm still looking at Dominion's track record and going in and seeing what the Sierra Club has to say and the amount of massive natural gas, oil pipelines that are being built all across the country, and the terrible spills that are going on a regular basis. I mean, you've probably heard about it. I mean, it's just astounding that there's so much damage. To think that, so I guess I don't mean to, and I get what you're saying in terms of the push, and you can't have the perfect. But when people who are paying for a deep green, are they in some way putting a paycheck toward Dominion in their hands, where
the people that are buying deep green are getting power from wind and solar facilities in California that have been built solely because of the contracts that we entered into, long-term contracts. And so those projects wouldn't have existed if MCE hadn't entered into those contracts. And the other thing that our deep green customers are doing is, half of any revenue that we bring in from the deep green program goes into building projects locally in our service area, including this 65-acre solar facility in Richmond and the solar electric vehicle charging station in San Rafael in our parking lot. But I want to go back to your question about the Sierra Club and just highlight the fact that Sierra Club was absolutely essential to our launch. When we were busy with analysis and talking to the local governments about forming this JPA, there was a lot of concern about taking on something new, something that hadn't been done before, something that seemed impossible and complicated, as you've mentioned. The Sierra Club would show up at these city council meetings with stacks of signed letters that they had gotten at farmers markets and through interface in the community. And they really spoke for the public and the people that were really desperate to have a way to get greener energy choices in their household or in their business. And we have a real debt of gratitude to the Sierra Club for making sure those voices were heard, because it really helped our elected leaders know how to respond to the question of whether to join MCE or not, whether to take bold action. The Sierra Club, and also there were many local advocacy groups throughout Marin County that helped in the same way the Sierra Club did, speaking at these council meetings and helping to tell the story of why this was so critically important. And I know the Sierra Club, now that we've launched, they are not, they're needed in other places, but they're continuing to do excellent work that I think very highly of. But I just have a lot of respect for the folks at the Sierra Club and the other local groups that helped get MCE launched.
Well, I think that everybody in many ways, and the Sierra Club, I mean, God bless them for being alive with us. We are in this point on the planet, when I was looking for the context, where we're all looking for that, almost like water trying to find the path through. And to do that, sometimes, you have to fill up even the deep spaces before you can go forward.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, in terms of still that, in the inner realm of MCE, when these decisions are made, you say that the talk has to, that you carefully look at your partners.
Yeah.
Is that a debate that takes place in the offices of MCE or in the boardroom, or both?
Primarily in the technical committee, which is a public meeting. So our technical committee will look at power supply contracts and give input. And certainly we do talk about the companies that we're considering engaging in business with. We do look at track records, and there are a lot of factors to consider, and that's certainly one of them. And I think the other thing that's very important in decision making is, you need to enter into contracts with folks that, for the most part, you want to have a lot of contracts with folks that have experience and a track record, have a strong, credit rating, so that we are able to ensure that we're not going to have, unexpected costs hitting our customers. So it's, we have to have a pretty conservative approach in on the business side of things, making sure that we're finding affordable options for customers with counterparties that have experience, and counterparties that are, ready, willing, and able to sell us the green power that we want. And we see that as a win-win for the most part. But I think what you're getting at is some of the, there are companies in the energy sector that have a lot of experience and history with fossil fuels, and that is a vestige of the old way of doing things. And it's there are little to no energy companies that don't have that sort of other side of their business, but the exciting thing is that that's really becoming more of a thing of the past for many of these companies, and we're glad to be part of that.
Seems like we are part of this sort of centralized world where we're very dependent upon, but maybe we're needing to look at, in terms of what might be more resilient, what might be more sustainable, would be things that are less centralized, and things that I think that was the roots of where MCE and the whole entity began, or the whole vision of how do you make the local be the power source. How can we get that? And so I think that I'm wondering, in the long-term vision of MCE, do you see yourself sort of as a facilitator of maybe people having the power on their roofs, and do you have special offerings for people in the citizens of Marin to get all that energy generating equipment on their own homes?
We sure do. Yeah, we have we pay an above market rate to folks that are generating more than they use on their rooftops. We've done that from the beginning.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. We also are eager to help folks get battery storage incorporated into their solar system if they're able to, because that will help with the evening load demand. I was explaining earlier, it could also help with the PSPS events and resiliency. In addition to what's happening on the individual home and business scale, we also have a feed-in tariff that promotes local projects at a smaller scale to get built and sell their power to us. And we have 13 completed projects already that are up and running and delivering power to us. Folks might not know about all of them. There's one on top of the Cost Plus Plaza down in Corte Madera. We've got one at a storage facility, a mini storage facility up in Novato. We have a project at the Cooley Quarry in Novato that's actually a third choice for customers we haven't talked about yet, but it's called Local Soul. So some of our customers are really eager to have their energy use tied to a local solar project. And so we developed this special rate called Local Soul, and folks can choose that product and have their energy use tied to that project for a 20-year term at a fixed rate. So we've entered into a contract with the local developer that built that project, and we're passing the cost directly through to any customers that sign up for that. So that's another example of a small-scale project. And then we also have some projects that have been built in the 2-megawatt project in Richmond, the 10.5 megawatt project in Richmond that's on 65 acres. We have a project in Oakley, also at a storage facility, and we just launched our first Napa feed-in tariff project this year. It's 2 megawatts in the Green Valley area. So we have a lot of local supply.
Is it keeping up with the expansion of your base of
Exactly.
group, and you're able to provide even a greater percentage to Marin County? I'm not trying to be so Marin centric, but it did, I guess it was started here to serve Marin, and the roots are here, and so it'd be disappointing to hear that because you're now quadruple the size, that you haven't quadrupled the amount of green or certifiable green energy, right?
Yeah,
Usually you've been doing that more than that?
It's more than quadrupled.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And I think, the feed-in tariff in particular is it has taken a while for the landowners and developers to get familiar with it. And because it takes time to get recognized locally, we've had more time in Marin. So we do tend to have, we have more of our feed-in tariff projects have happened in Marin. There's a handful that have happened outside of Marin, but we've just been here longer. So there's more awareness of it.
And it's a, well, what about the, well, I was getting too much about wind, but how much of your, of MCE's purchase now would you say is within your own? Is there a way of defining that with your own power sources that is your own? Because the way you describe it, like even when you buy a fuel through Calpine or Dominion, you feel like you're having a sense of getting. Would that be a fair thing to say? A sense of, is there a definition? Is there a difference between the energy sources there?
Folks can take a look at our website if they want to know more, but we've listed every single power purchase agreement that we've entered into for long or short-term supply, where it's located. We also have a map that shows where each of these are located. It shows which labor unions were involved in building those projects. So yeah, there's a lot of detail on those projects, and we feel like each one that we've helped get built through a power purchase agreement is one of our contracts. We do tend to have bigger supply choices, bigger sources of supply, scale-wise, outside of our service area, because land values are different. It's very expensive and very difficult to find big swaths of land within our service area footprint to build large-scale projects. So we really combine the local projects and complement them with the larger scale projects that we buy in other parts of California, including the Central Valley, and we even have a project as far south as Lancaster, for example.
Really? To provide energy, but even though it's symbolic, but to provide energy up from here.
It's not symbolic. It's energy that we are buying and getting onto the grid.
But it is taking up acreage in Lancaster or something like that.
It is taking up acreage in Lancaster, which we're grateful for. Lancaster is actually the town that started the third CCA, the third community choice program in the state, and it was also the first one in Southern California. So we have a lot of partnership programs with them.
Wow. Yeah. No, I think that it's an interesting issue where we're going with the planet, and there's a lot of different factors that are involved, and part of it is our growth issues as a planet, and maybe they're slowing down, even though we don't recognize that fact. Some don't, and perhaps that would someday be a situation where we wouldn't need to take, large amounts of land and build a big farm, but maybe every house could be an energy generator, and this really. Do you feel like does MCE have a definite goal towards that decentralization element, or is this sort of a not quite?
Our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while by getting more renewables onto the grid and through energy efficiency. While creating workforce benefits, social equity. So decentralization sometimes aligns with that. Sometimes it's better to buy things in a more centralized way or solve problems in a more centralized way, because you have fewer wires, for example. If we wanted to have a solar facility delivering directly to every house, that would create a lot more cost due to infrastructure. So our local solar program, for example, is a great way for folks that live in a multifamily complex to be able to tie their energy usage to a solar facility, because they don't want to have a wire going from somewhere far away all the way to their apartment. So that's an example where centralizing the resource can be a benefit. But I think all solutions are needed.
Right. Well, Dawn, it's been an interesting conversation. I thank you for joining me. I think everybody feels, or maybe has, a little bit of the tiller in their hands, whether we know it or not.
Yeah, true.
And we're all, maybe we don't see it all quite the same, but he's trying to move in that general direction. So I want to applaud you for taking the moment of your, not a moment, but your life and taking this organization to where you want. And I want to applaud those in your organization for taking a hard line against certain providers if they do show a record of being, that we say, kind of, and it's really hard because of the whole capital kind of, when I look at the owner of Calpine, that Calpine has an owner, and Calpine is just listed as just another little asset in somebody's game that they're playing with manipulation. And Old Dominion's track record is not pretty. You can go to the Sierra Club site. And so I guess I just, knowing, once again, that the green energy of the planet is coming through, I want to thank you. If you want to say something and wrap it up, Dawn, please do.
I do. I think that what I'd like to end on is just a few words of encouragement. That I think what we're seeing around the world and related to climate change can be really disheartening. But we have the power to make a lot of change in our communities. The car that we choose to drive can now be electric. There's huge rebates for that right now, for those of us that can afford that. We have rebates also for folks that might need some help affording that. We also have a choice now to, in our communities to opt up to deep green, get 100% renewable energy today. And I think if we can be the example that we want to see in the world, we can really create a model that has huge impact elsewhere.
And that brings up the next issues of what we're going to do with the batteries or this or that. But the civilization has a lot of learning, and it's a lot of experiencing a sense of responsibility toward the planet.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Dawn, it's a pleasure.
It's
thank
been a
you
pleasure.
so much.
Yeah.